I want to chat to you about why the climate movement will win the fight against big oil and gas. An underdog with the momentum of change behind it can win against a larger opponent simply by refusing to lose, whereas the larger opponent must win completely in order to avoid losing, i.e., it needs to crush the underdog entirely in order to win. This strategy is how the climate movement wins and how Canada can withstand the US in general. Energy economics already favors renewable energy. The business model of oil and gas corporations, which the US administration has made the mistake of betting on, is collapsing. A strong majority of Canadians favor renewables, and a supermajority, 93% of Canadians, want anti-greenwashing legislation. That's why oil and gas-tied interests are trying to turn democracies into oligarchies and dictatorships, because it is the only way that they can win completely, by creating these forms of government under which they can force people to stay dependent on their products. That's why they are spreading disinformation on renewable energy. That's why oil and gas interests will do anything they can to attack the climate movement, to try to divide us, to try to make you feel as if you are losing, hoping that you capitulate and surrender in advance. Because you are a vital voice for democracy, because you can win simply by causing trouble for them. Working to end extreme inequality is also a vital step for democracy to survive. Momentum is shifting on that issue too, and people are clearly waking up to the need for action, and they are angry. Welcome to a special episode of the Environment in Canada podcast, part of a new sub-series we'll be running on some Saturdays. We're calling this new sub-series Sovereignty Saturdays, and the common theme to these episodes will be a focus on countering attempts by the US government to annex Canada with an environmental lens. But these episodes are going to be about more than just that, because to protect Canada's sovereignty, and with it the communities and environments we know and love, we need to understand why it's under threat. Around the world, democracy is under attack, and far from secondary, environmental and energy issues are core to understanding why that's happening. The erosion of rights and democracy anywhere harms us all and hurts our ability to address climate change, biodiversity loss, and to make the changes we need to make in order to have a safe, renewable future. Wealthy polluters have identified their main obstacle to continuing to profit from pollution, and that obstacle is democracy. If you haven't yet, please be sure to check out our previous 5 episodes of the Sovereignty Saturdays sub-series. I'll link to them below. But I'm your host, Connor Curtis, Head of Communications at Sierra Club Canada, and today's episode is more of a short update than a full episode, but there is one recent piece of news we felt you should hear, namely that our sister organization, south of the border, Sierra Club US, is suing the Trump administration for DOGE records. But before we get into that, I have a message for you, one I hope brings a bit of light into these times we are facing, and to all of you following the news about the International Climate Conference, COP30, taking place this week and next in Brazil. Or perhaps those of you simply a little underwhelmed at the Canadian government's action to transition us here to renewable energy, watching as more nation-building projects are announced, some of which are obviously not nation-building like liquefied natural gas projects. I want to chat to you about why the climate movement will win the fight against big oil and gas. An underdog with the momentum of change behind it can win against a larger opponent simply by refusing to lose, whereas the larger opponent must win completely in order to avoid losing, i.e., it needs to crush the underdog entirely in order to win. This strategy is how the climate movement wins and how Canada can withstand the US in general. Energy economics already favors renewable energy. The business model of oil and gas corporations, which the US administration has made the mistake of betting on, is collapsing. A strong majority of Canadians favor renewables, and a supermajority, 93% of Canadians, want anti-greenwashing legislation. That's why oil and gas-tied interests are trying to turn democracies into oligarchies and dictatorships, because it is the only way that they can win completely, by creating these forms of government under which they can force people to stay dependent on their products. That's why they are spreading disinformation on renewable energy. That's why oil and gas interests will do anything they can to attack the climate movement, to try to divide us, to try to make you feel as if you are losing, hoping that you capitulate and surrender in advance. Because you are a vital voice for democracy. Because you can win simply by causing trouble for them. We don't have the money of oil and gas corporations, but momentum and resilience is on the climate movement's side. We just need to keep democracy alive. Helping communities, especially oil and gas dependent ones, transition to renewables is one of the best ways we can do that. But so is keeping climate policies in place and slowing attempts to remove climate policy, as Sierra Club Canada supporters recently did. So is bringing new people into the fold of climate action in person and on social media through conversations, as well as organizing lawsuits and protests. And the faster we can accelerate our win, the more lives and homes will be saved from climate change. Working to end extreme inequality is also a vital step for democracy to survive. Momentum is shifting on that issue too, and people are clearly waking up to the need for action, and they are angry. But in terms of energy, we don't need to defeat oil and gas corporations outright. We just need to cause trouble for them, to create roadblocks against their disinformation, to build renewable alternatives with and without government help, to disrupt their narratives and framing of what is possible, and to use their own lobbying tactics against them. It may feel like oil and gas corporations are everywhere, but in reality, you are. And just to add that after initially recording this, news broke that the International Energy Agency has confirmed in November 2025 that renewable energy will grow faster than any major energy source in this decade and will make the transition away from oil and gas inevitable. And the reporting was thanks to The Guardian. The other important thing to understand about oil and gas corporations is that their self-interest is not served by simply producing oil and gas and making a profit. They must create the appearance that they will continue to expand, otherwise a lot of their assets become devalued. So they'll even go so far as to propose projects they know have no chance of succeeding, especially in the long term, given the rise of renewable energy. And the danger there is mostly in the possibility that our government attempts to keep alive these zombie oil and gas projects with subsidies. That's also why the US government south of the border has been putting significant pressure on agencies like the International Energy Agency to try and get them to report ridiculous scenarios, where, for instance, all development of renewable energy technology stops tomorrow. The hope is that journalists will fall for those fake demand scenarios and in so doing reinforce the false image oil and gas corporations are trying to project about their future. But this is just about image. In reality, the renewable revolution continues. And you may see news pieces claiming the International Energy Agency now says oil demand will continue to rise to 2050. Again, this is under a single very dubious scenario in which essentially all renewable progress and technological advancement stops, and under which effectively we assume that government stands still in the face of climate change. This is not the most likely scenario by far, and as I mentioned, was really the product of the Trump administration putting pressure on the International Energy Agency to include that scenario when they normally don't, for the reasons that it's so ridiculous. As such, the claim that oil demand is going to increase to 2050 should be taken with the same seriousness as anything else Trump randomly tweets, i.e. none. But I do think it's particularly telling of a desperation on oil and gas corporations' part that they got their friends in the US administration to put pressure for this faulty scenario to be published. They're clearly scared people are going to wake up to their business model being a bubble, and for them to go this far is all the more telling. You can find a link to sources for this episode in a link in the description of this podcast. So let's talk about a couple of those actions you can take and actions others are taking. First of all, a reminder that we have a new anti-greenwashing action, an email action you can take to send a message to our elected leaders like Mark Carney on the importance of preventing oil and gas funded disinformation. I cannot stress how important anti-greenwashing measures are. These measures were recently weakened as part of the 2025 budget announcement, and that is extremely concerning. For the past several months, greenwashing has been considerably less of a problem in Canada, with some oil and gas interests pulling down whole sections of their websites and social media since anti-greenwashing regulations came into effect. After all, oil and gas corporations spent decades lying to the public about climate change and trying to delay climate action. Over 90% of Canadians support anti-greenwashing laws, as I mentioned, but While announcing Budget 2025, the federal government also announced its intention to weaken anti-greenwashing laws and potentially abandon the corporate emissions cap. This would be extremely dangerous for Canada at a time when oil and gas-sponsored disinformation is actively playing a role in dismantling democracies. It is also vital for Canadians' health that we know the truth about oil and gas projects. Residents of Kitimat, BC, say LNG Canada's operations are leaving them exhausted and worried for their health, as the Narwhal reported recently. There are already increased reports of respiratory problems in the area linked to flaring as a plume of black smoke rises from LNG Canada. So shouldn't LNG, gas, and oil projects have to report accurately on their impacts? Help stand up to big oil and gas. Call on federal leaders like Prime Minister Mark Carney to keep anti-greenwashing regulations strong and to ensure that there will be an emissions cap on wealthy oil and gas corporations. You can find that message action on our website, and it's linked in the description of this podcast. And if you'd like to send a personalized message, just contact us at communications@sierraclub.ca and we can arrange that for you. Also, here's an important message from our sister organization, Sierra Club US, south of the border, that will hopefully lift your spirits as it did mine. Sierra Club US is suing the Trump administration for DOGE records and the email communications of Elon Musk and others. Here's what they had to say in their recent announcement about the lawsuit. The public deserves to know what's happening behind closed doors. Sierra Club US has filed a new lawsuit against the Trump administration after its Department of Government Efficiency refused to release records about its ties to polluters and special interests. We're calling for transparency about who's influencing DOGE's massive budget cuts and how those decisions are harming people, public health, and the environment. During Trump's first administration, the U.S. Sierra Club's ELP FOIA work was crucial in exposing numerous scandals. Most notably, U.S. Sierra Club's efforts helped lead to the resignation of Trump's first EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt. I'll link to the full announcement from Sierra Club US on their Facebook page below in case you'd like to share it. In case you're wondering why I keep referring to them as a sister organization as well, for clarity I'll note that there are 3 distinct Sierra Clubs. Sierra Club Canada, that's us, Sierra Club BC in British Columbia, and Sierra Club in the US. While we sometimes work together on common causes, these 3 organizations are all separate legal entities with separate management, financial structures, and boards. So if you're looking to donate to one of us this giving season, please note that a donation to one of the clubs is not a donation to all 3 clubs, but only to the one you selected. You can always support Sierra Club Canada and this podcast via the donation link in the description. Just an FYI. We at Sierra Club Canada last met with Sierra Club US at a cross-border meeting back in February 2025 in Montreal, and I'd like to read you our media statement from the meeting from that time, as it's still very relevant today. And as our executive director pointed out at the time, it was reminiscent, that meeting, of the sort of healthy relationship that Canada previously has had with the United States in general, which now often feels like a thing of the past. The statement is entitled Wind Energy and Tariffs. Sierra Club Canada and Sierra Club US meet in Montreal. Canadian wind turbines should be made with Canadian steel and aluminum. Again, this is from February 12, 2025. Sierra Club Canada met this week with their sister organization, Sierra Club US, in Montreal to discuss collaboration on a number of projects, including growing offshore wind in Canada and raising awareness of the destabilizing effects U.S. tariffs on Canadian products will have on manufacturing. Our friends at the Sierra Club US have done a lot of work with communities to develop offshore wind, which we are hoping we can apply to developing a Canadian offshore wind industry, creating jobs and economic diversification, says Gretchen Fitzgerald, National Programs Director with Sierra Club Canada. Data centers in Canada should be powered by renewable energy, Sierra Club Canada argues, as renewables provide more employment than oil and gas, and as they help to localize the benefits in Canadian communities. The decision by the U.S. administration to restrict renewable energy development also only hands more power over to the future of energy to the Chinese government, which is working quickly to control global tech supply chains. Other subjects at the meeting included wrestling with tariffs on Canadian aluminum steel. The Canadian steel industry, it should be noted, is already comparatively green and is on track for making major emissions reductions. And the United States relies on Canada's production of clean primary aluminum. Steel is also used extensively in renewable energy infrastructure such as wind turbines, making it an important part of the green transition. The U.S. Sierra Club is also continuing to coordinate with the United Steelworkers Union, which represents workers on both sides of the border. Together, we are sharing lessons that can help strengthen Canada's future and sovereignty. Around this table, we see what the U.S.-Canada relationship should be. 2 separate entities supporting each other in friendship, says Fitzgerald. Since that meeting in February, we've actually hired a dedicated offshore wind coordinator, and we are continuing to create resources for communities interested in going green. You should also check out, if you haven't already, our previous podcast entitled Your Community Can Drive the Transition to Renewables, Don't Wait for the State. We talk with Hadrian Mertens-Kirkwood about examples of renewable energy actions in places like Edmonton, Alberta. I hope these updates help cheer you up, and a reminder to take action against greenwashing at the link in the description. There are also events you can take part in coming up in case you missed them. First of all, there's a Shoulder to Shoulder We Are All Treaty People rally taking place Saturday, November 15th at the Halifax Commons on the corner of Robbie and Cogswell. That's at 12 p.m. November 15th. This is in solidarity with land defenders and water protectors at Hunter's Mountain and all resistance movements in Nova Scotia. You can find out more about that at Sierra Club Canada Foundation on our Facebook page. Our Ontario chapter is hosting a webinar on big oil versus big water. That is on Tuesday, November 18th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. EST on Zoom. And as well, in case you missed it, we are holding a climate adaptation training program information session. This will be a hands-on program helping newcomers and community members gain practical experience in community climate action, native plants, soil health, rain garden installation, and stormwater management, all while learning how green infrastructure strengthens climate resilience and supports local ecosystems. It's a partnership of Sierra Club Canada and the Mixed Coast Collective. Participants will also receive a rain garden and green skills certificate, a valuable way to help build skills and strengthen their sustainability portfolio, and a first step toward green career pathways in the growing sustainability sector. The info sessions are taking place November 28th and December 10th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and you can register online. Once again, the links to these events will be included in the description of this podcast. And in case you missed it, our Wild Child Prince Edward Island program has spots available in the kids' winter program. Wild Child PEI still has spaces available in all of their winter programs and want to invite you to register if you're interested. And once again, I link to that in the description of this podcast. And before we end today, just a reminder that you can take action on environmental issues by visiting sierraclub.ca. We have tons of petitions, other actions and events, and regular news updates you can sign up for on the homepage. You can also find Sierra Club Canada on social media, and you can listen to the Environment in Canada podcast on the Harbinger Media Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast also airs on CKUT Broadcast Radio in Montreal, 90.3 FM bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to click follow or subscribe to get the latest episodes from us.